Hello, and welcome to the first in a series of videos from Yellow Crane Tai Chi. My name is Harold, and I'll be showing you a 10-step Tai Chi form that has been modified for practicing in your own home. This course is designed for the students of Yellow Crane Tai Chi to practice whilst they're self-isolating, but also for anyone out there who wants to give Tai Chi a try whilst they're stuck at home. Before we can do any Tai Chi movement, first of all, we have to get into a Tai Chi stance. And before we get into a stance, I need to introduce you to a little rule that I use when I'm teaching Tai Chi. It's a very simple one because you already know it. It's based on Goldilocks and the 3 bears. Basically in Tai Chi, something can be too much of one or too much of the other, but you really want it to be just right. Not too hard, not too soft, not too hot, or not too cold. So if you remember, whenever you're doing this kind of thing, always make sure that everything feels just right. So we're going to move to the stance, and first off, look at the feet. We build our Tai Chi stance up from our feet. So the first thing we have to do is apply this Goldilocks rule to how our feet are on the ground. So the first thing we can look at is how wide they are. Can they be too wide or too narrow? So we don't want a stance that's too wide, and we don't want a stance that's too narrow. We want a stance that's just right. And for most people, this stance is approximately shoulder width. After looking at how far they are apart, the next thing we have to look at is where they're pointing. They can either be pointing too far out, pointing too far in, or just right. So if we've got our feet at the right width and pointing in the right direction, it should feel like we're standing on a set of train tracks. This helps us articulate the ankle and the knee much better. So how do we make our legs feel just right? Well, again, we're looking at the what could be hot or what could be cold. What are the 2 extreme conditions our legs could be in? The simple way we can do this is my legs can be too high, so I don't have any balance, or my legs can be too low, so I can't move. I want to get a balance between too high and too low. One thing to pay attention to here is I've been doing Tai Chi for 20 years, so I can get all the way down into this squat. You may not be able to get down that far, so please don't try. Once we've got our feet firmly planted on the ground, we can move up to the legs. It's important to remember the legs have 3 joints, the ankle, the knee, and the hip, and they work in unison. So whenever we're doing any movements in the legs, any bend should be in the ankle, the knee, and the hip all together. So now we know what Goldilocks doesn't like. How do we make our legs just right? The trick with this is to remember that, like I said before, we have 3 joints in our legs that all bend together. So if I turn to the side, I'll show you how I become a concertina for a few seconds. Okay? If I'm standing up straight, my legs are a little too high. If I sit down a little bit, I start coming down to just right. If I go below this, I'm starting to get a little bit too low, so I bring it up to just right again. In Tai Chi, we call this sitting down into position a horse stance. So it should feel like you're sitting down onto a horse. Bear this in mind, because one of the things you want to do is slightly tilt your pelvis forward when you're sitting down so that your bum is underneath yourself. So moving up from the legs, we look at the torso. The torso is a very easy one to work out where just right is. I'm neither leaning to my left or leaning to my right or leaning forward or backwards. I'm in the middle. My back is straight and my head is on top of my shoulders. When it comes to the shoulders, Goldilocks isn't the person we're looking at to get this right. We're actually looking at the bears. So if we look at the conditions in our shoulders that are just not right, it's very easy to use the bear as our example for what is right. So my shoulders can be up too high or down too low. They can be pulled far too back or rolled far too forward. We look at our bear friend. If I roll my shoulders like I'm a bear and have my arms like this, letting them hang, this is just right. So this is why the Chinese use a lot of animal metaphor in things like Tai Chi and their Kung Fu. It's very easy to make your shoulders be like a bear if you know what a bear looks like. Finishing off, we come to the head. The head is another one that's very easy to work out what's just right. It's not leaning to one side or the other. It's not looking down, and it's not looking up. The trick is pick a point on the horizon and just look at it. This makes it very easy to keep your head up straight. The important thing about this is if your head is up straight, then your throat is clear and you can breathe properly. So if I go through the Goldilocks rule for each part of my body, starting at my feet and working up to my head, I should find myself in a Tai Chi stance. So first of all, make sure my feet are just right in width. They're just right pointing forward. So that's my feet. I then let my knees bend so that my legs feel just right. I make sure that my body is on straight. I then roll my shoulders like a bear, so my thumbs are pointing towards my thighs. I then make sure that my head isn't tilting from one side to the other. I'm not looking up, I'm not looking down, I'm actually pointing straight ahead. And then I'm now in a ready stance to do Tai Chi. So that's the basic stance for Tai Chi. This is very important because not only is it our starting position, it's also a very important reference point for whenever we're doing any Tai Chi movements. Back to this just right principle. If our ready stance feels just right, at any point in the form, we should feel just like we are in the ready stance, i.e. just right. So now that we can stand, let's start moving. And we'll go on to the first movement in the form called commencement. So when we start moving, we have to add another rule. Along with the Goldilocks rule, we have another rule called the 70% rule. If you're not that good with decimals, the rule of thirds is another way of thinking about this. The important thing is you don't want to be pushing yourself too hard whenever you're doing any exercises. The 70% rule basically says if your just right position is the middle, i.e. 50%, anytime you move, you don't want to be going further than 70% in that direction. So if this is 50% for me, when I'm coming up, I want to come to 70% up. Going back to 50%. If I'm going down, I only want to go 70% down. So from 70% down to 70% up and back to the middle. Keeping the 70% rule in mind, what I can now do is start bouncing up and down on my legs. Always start by going down, because gravity is your friend and will help you with this movement. You don't want to stand up first because, well, you're fighting gravity. We want to make this as easy as possible. This is one of the points of Tai Chi. So if I start at my middle position, I can go down to my 70% position. I can then raise up to my other 70% position and then sit down again. I'm looking to get this to be a nice flowing motion where I'm standing up a little bit and sitting down a little bit. With this move, we can go back to our bear metaphor, particularly a bear with an itchy back. We've all seen the videos on YouTube of a bear scratching its back. It stands next to a tree and kind of rubs itself up and down, trying to get that part in the middle of its back that it can't quite reach. We've all had this sensation ourselves, so we know it quite well. If you haven't seen this before, go and Google bear scratching its back. This will explain this move perfectly to you. One of the things about Tai Chi is we try to do things as easily as possible. We try to make our life as simple and uncomplicated as possible. So we're going to use this standing up and down movement, a bit like a bear scratching its back, to generate some movement somewhere else in the body. So I'm trying to use as little muscles as possible to make a movement. So if I've got my Tai Chi stance right, and I'm properly relaxed and everything's just right, when I start doing this leg movement, something might happen. So every time I sit down and stand up, I can feel it moving through my body. If I speed up a little bit, you'll notice my hands start moving on their own. So the spirit of Tai Chi is to be as lazy as possible, or more importantly, use what's happening normally to do something else. And one way Tai Chi does this is it actually uses your own breathing to help you move. So to show you how breathing makes you move, we're going to do a little bit of an experiment. Take your arms and place them hard by your sides. Point your fingers towards the ground and try and keep them as stiff as possible. Okay? Now you're going to take a deep breath in. As your lungs inflate, your arms get pushed out to the sides. So when you breathe out afterwards, your arms come back down again. Now relax. And we can get that same feeling every time we breathe. So every time I breathe in, my arms move out a little bit. And every time I breathe out, they come down again. So now what we want to do is get these two things happening together. Most importantly, in time with each other. So every time I stand up, I breathe in, and every time I sit down, I breathe out. So if I stand up and breathe in, and sit down and breathe out, and use these two motions that move my hands together, I should be able to move my hands further. So we always want to start with an out breath and a sit down. So what we're going to do is we're going to breathe in, and then breathe out and sit down. So if I breathe in and stand up at the same time, and then breathe out and sit down at the same time, my hands move a little bit further because both motions add a little bit more energy into it. So I breathe in and stand up, breathe out and sit down. So breath in, breath out, sit down. Standing up, breathing in, breathing out, sitting down. Standing up, breathing in, breathing out and sitting down. So without doing very much at all, we've got the move started. We've overcome the initial friction that makes moving difficult. If you've ever pushed a car, you'll realize once it starts to move, it's a lot easier. So this initial friction is compensated for by using the standing and breathing motion. So from here, we can employ a little bit of muscle to finish the move off. So to help us finish off the move, I'm going to add one more little metaphor to help you when you're doing your movement. When you were a kid, you used to have these pair of mittens that had a string on them that went through the back of your coat. That meant if one of them got pulled, your other arm got pulled along. So you had this kind of feeling in your arms. Now, instead of having one mitten on one hand and one mitten on the other hand, I've actually got one mitten stuck on each foot and it's attached to the hand on the same side. So every time I bend my leg, my arms straighten. Every time I straighten my leg, my arms bend. It's like there's a little string attached to the back of my hand which winches over my back and pulls my hands up like this. The image that I have in my head when I do this, I always feel like a velociraptor from Jurassic Park. So now we have three ideas to help us do the movement. We straighten our legs, we breathe in, and we think about the little mitten between our hands and our feet. So when our legs straighten, our arms bend, and when our legs bend, our arms straighten. So now let's have a go at the move. So as always, we start with a breath in and then a breath out, sitting down. So breathe in, and breathe out. So I'm going to breathe in, stand up, and winch from the back of my wrists. So I'm breathing in and standing up, breathing out and sitting down. Breathing in and standing up, breathing out and sitting down. Breathing in and standing up, breathing out and sitting down. Breathing in and standing up, breathing out and sitting down. The keen-eyed ones among you may have noticed something in there. My hands were following along rather than pointing straight out. This is where I come to my last piece of advice for anybody practicing this move. And if you were watching closely, you probably recognize the move from one of my favorite movies of all time, The Karate Kid. This is painting the fence. It's not wax on, wax off. We will get to that later, I promise you, but this one is painting the fence. So if you go back and watch Karate Kid, it'll give you a perfect reference of what I'm doing here. So if I'm taking the great Miyagi-san's advice when I'm doing this move, I should always think that I'm painting a fence. But as a Tai Chi player, I'm painting 2 plaques at once. I'm a little bit cleverer than Daniel-san. Breathe in and sit down. So for this, I'm painting the fence. So standing, breathing in, and painting the fence. Sitting down, breathing out, and painting the fence. So up and down, and up and down. Up and down. Up and down. We want to build this movement up concentrating on 3 elements: the breath, the raising and lowering of the legs, and the painting of the fence. So if we start with the breathing, we can breathe in, which moves the arms, and breathe out, which moves the arms. Do this a few times. So breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. Next we'll add the legs. So with the breath, breathing in, breathing out and sitting down. Breathing in and standing up. Breathing out and sitting down. Breathing in, breathing out. Standing up, sitting down. Now we add the winch and the paintbrush. So standing up, sitting down. Breathing in, breathing out. Painting up the fence, painting down the fence. So as you can see, I can do repetitions of this movement as well as doing it as one move in a longer Tai Chi form. It's never a bad idea, particularly when you're going through the form, to get used to each movement individually so you can feel what the movement is like. So to finish off, I'm going to demonstrate the move 5 times from the front and 5 times to the side so that you can follow along and practice at home. So that was the first move of the Tai Chi 10-step form. In the following videos, we will cover all the other moves in the form, plus videos on how to connect the moves together, plus a few exercises on stretches and warm-ups to help you improve your Tai Chi practice. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe so that you'll be notified of all the other videos in this series. Thank you.